The morning after, children wandered the neighborhood, pointing out what had changed. "That tree wasn't broken before," one said. "That trampoline wasn't there." They turned it into a game, spot the difference, but the parents watched in silence, tallying lost cars, collapsed roofs, shredded fences. One boy found a soggy storybook in a ditch and began reading aloud, sitting cross-legged on the wet sidewalk. Others joined him. For a moment, no one remembered the night's terror, only the sound of a child's voice trying to bring a story back to life. A pastor live-streamed prayers throughout the hurricane using backup battery packs. Hundreds tuned in from darkened homes and flooded shelters. "It kept us connected," one viewer wrote. "I couldn't see the sky, but I could hear faith." The stream ran 14 hours without pause.
Aber so richtig krass. Guck mal die Bäume an. Alter. Da ist ein Bäume weg.
In the early hours after the hurricane made landfall, 62-year-old Marvin Ellis carried his paralyzed neighbor 2 miles through waist-high floodwaters to reach a rescue point. With no cell service and streets submerged, Ellis wrapped the man in plastic sheeting, tied him to his back with extension cords, and waded through swirling debris. "I couldn't leave him. He's family," Ellis said. Both were treated for exhaustion and exposure. Paramedics say their survival came down to Ellis's strength, calm thinking, and deep sense of duty. "He saved my life," the neighbor whispered from his hospital bed. After the storm passed, silence fell so suddenly it felt wrong. Everything that once made sound, birds, cars, wind chimes, was gone or broken. James stood barefoot in the wet grass, staring at the sky. His house had lost half its roof, and a pine tree lay across his porch. But all he could think about was how quiet the world had become. It felt like the wind stole the noise, he later told a neighbor. That night, he slept on a mattress in the garage, listening for anything to return. First responders were stunned to find an SUV lodged halfway into the second-floor balcony of an apartment complex. According to witnesses, the parked vehicle was lifted by extreme winds during the hurricane's peak and hurled across a 40-foot embankment. No one was inside the SUV, and the residents of the affected apartment were unharmed. "I thought it was a bomb going off," said one tenant. Engineers say wind acceleration between nearby buildings likely created a tunnel effect. "It wasn't just strong wind. It was focused, violent wind," said a structural analyst on scene. The downtown business district was left in ruins after sustained winds sheared off signage, shattered storefronts, and caused partial collapses in 4 commercial buildings. The city estimates more than $70 million in damage to infrastructure alone. Crews are still working to clear glass and metal from the main thoroughfares. Of the 123 businesses surveyed post-storm, only 27 were able to reopen. Local officials have requested federal disaster relief as cleanup efforts intensify. No one expected the tree to survive. It had stood in the town square for over a century, and as the storm hit, people watched it bend almost to the ground. The next morning, every building around it was damaged. Windows shattered, signs ripped off, but the tree still stood, stripped of leaves but upright. Someone tied a ribbon to its trunk. 2 days later, others added flowers, candles, handwritten notes. It became a quiet monument to the idea that some things, even in chaos, can hold fast. Inmates from the county jail were evacuated by armored bus, hands zip-tied, escorted by National Guard. A low-lying floodplain threatened the facility, and officials moved over 140 prisoners to a high-security unit inland. It was a quiet, tense transfer. "We've never evacuated our jail before," said the sheriff. Power was lost 2 hours later, and parts of the jail were knee-deep in water by morning. A rescue team responding to a 911 call found an elderly man trapped in his attic by rising water. He had broken through the ceiling with a crowbar and waited for 18 hours with a flashlight and a transistor radio. They heard the tapping from the boat, he said. He was dehydrated but otherwise fine. They were angels, he said of the crew. Three fishermen who stayed aboard their boat during the storm are missing. The vessel's GPS last pinged 2 miles offshore before signals were lost. Debris believed to be from the boat washed ashore Sunday. Search efforts continue by air and sea, though officials say conditions are challenging. The families are urging anyone with information to contact authorities. When the hurricane hit, 16-year-old Brianna lost nearly everything. Her family's home was badly damaged, and most of their belongings vanished in the wind. But 3 days later, a neighbor found her bright blue prom dress tangled in a tree 3 miles away, still intact. "It sounds silly," she said, but it was the one thing that felt normal. Volunteers cleaned and restored it. Local businesses are now planning a community prom for displaced teens. "After everything we've lost," Brianna said, "this one dress being found made it feel like hope's still out there." I was holding a mug of coffee when it happened. 1 second, the porch was there, the swing, the plants, the little welcome mat. The next, it lifted like a magic carpet and vanished into the sky. I didn't scream. I just stood there with the door open and wind roaring like a jet engine. That porch had been there since '89. My daughter took her prom pictures on it. My dog gave birth under it, and now it's gone. I found the swing 2 blocks away, still swaying. Everything else? Somewhere in Kansas, maybe. A firefighter swam across a flooded intersection carrying a life vest in his teeth. Inside the stranded SUV was a woman 9 months pregnant. Contractions already started. With help from neighbors, she was floated on an air mattress to dry ground, then rushed to a hospital. Her baby was born 2 hours later, healthy and strong. "He came into the world like a rescue mission," the father said.
I have no idea how strong these winds are, but I'm getting hailed on.
As winds intensified and their home began to shake, the Patel family abandoned their living room and climbed into the walk-in freezer at the back of their restaurant. With wind screaming outside and parts of the roof tearing away, they sat in darkness for over an hour, surrounded by bags of frozen vegetables and crates of meat. It was the only room with no windows and a steel door, said Mrs. Patel. When they emerged, the dining area was destroyed, but the freezer was untouched. Cold never felt so safe, joked their teenage son. After the hurricane and widespread flooding along the southern coast, rescue teams found 17-year-old Lucas Reyes floating alone through a submerged neighborhood, clinging to the door of a refrigerator. His family's trailer had been swept away overnight. Using jumper cables, Reyes tied himself to the door and drifted for 16 hours through dark, debris-filled waters. "I just kept thinking I had to stay awake," he told medics. Cold, dehydrated, and covered in cuts, he was taken to a local hospital and is expected to recover fully. Emergency officials called his survival remarkable and credited his quick thinking under pressure. A group of 5 hikers who had set out before the storm were reported overdue when families lost contact. Their last known location was near a backcountry trail in the national forest. Heavy winds toppled trees and blocked access roads. Rescue teams located their abandoned campsite but found no sign of the hikers. A coordinated search is underway with drones, dogs, and volunteers. Paramedics carried a boy with cerebral palsy down 4 flights of stairs after the elevator failed and rising water threatened the building. His wheelchair was damaged, but they improvised with a rolling dolly and straps. "They didn't hesitate," said his mother. "They treated him like family." The family was later airlifted to a shelter equipped for medical needs. After the storm cleared, dozens of residents posted photos of found items to help neighbors reconnect with lost property. One family was shocked to see their trampoline wedged high in a pine tree 2 streets over, despite having tied it down. "It looked like a nest for giant birds," the father said. The trampoline frame was twisted, but mostly intact. With help from a tree service, they managed to recover it. "Next time," he laughed, "I'm chaining it to the car." Officials continue to warn that unsecured backyard items can become deadly projectiles in hurricane winds. In the rural outskirts of the county, 2 massive wind turbine blades snapped mid-storm, scattering fiberglass across nearby fields. Residents say the sound was like cannon fire. One farmer found a 12-foot shard embedded in his barn. It missed the cows by inches, he said. The turbines, rated for high winds, weren't meant to withstand the recorded 140 miles per hour gusts. No injuries were reported, but the incident reignited debate about wind energy infrastructure in hurricane-prone areas. Engineers have been dispatched to assess the remaining turbines for structural weakness. The 140-year-old bell tower of St. Jude's Church collapsed overnight as hurricane winds exceeding 100 miles per hour battered the region. Witnesses described a thunderous cracking sound before the structure crumbled, scattering bricks across the square. No one was injured as the area had been evacuated, but the loss of the historic landmark hit locals hard. "It was the soul of this town," one resident said through tears. Authorities say the winds were too strong for the aging structure to withstand. Volunteers are already planning to preserve parts of the wreckage for future restoration. A woman driving home before the worst of the winds hit watched in horror as the truck in front of her lifted off the highway and spun like a paper cup before crashing into a ditch. She pulled over, heart pounding, expecting the worst, but the driver crawled out, dazed but unharmed. "He looked more confused than injured," she said. Authorities said the wind reached over 110 miles per hour in that area, enough to lift lightweight vehicles off the road surface. An estimated 12 million tons of debris now cover the affected coastal region. Everything from drywall to rooftops to boats thrown inland lies in chaotic piles across roads and lawns. Landfills are overwhelmed. Officials plan to open temporary dump sites and have called in National Guard units to assist with logistics. Cleanup costs could exceed $500 million. The storm was an hour long. The cleanup may take a year, said a federal disaster response coordinator. During the worst hours of the storm, volunteer firefighter Dana Price made solo trips by boat into flooded neighborhoods, rescuing 11 people, including a bedridden woman and 3 small children. With official resources overwhelmed, Price launched her own kayak from the fire station and worked through the night. "I just couldn't sit there and wait," she said. Battling wind, darkness, and floating wreckage, she pulled one family from a rooftop using bed sheets as rope. Residents are calling her a hero. "She didn't hesitate," one survivor said. "She saved us when no one else could get through." A 30-foot metal billboard was torn from its supports and hurled through the second-story window of a downtown apartment complex. Miraculously, No one was in the room when it hit. The wind-carried structure demolished furniture, shattered glass, and embedded part of itself into the opposite wall. "It sounded like a bomb went off," said a neighbor. Fire officials said if the impact had happened an hour earlier, during a birthday party in the same unit, there would have been fatalities. The billboard's remains were later found 4 blocks away. A 9-year-old boy separated from his parents during evacuation was found safe at a shelter 60 miles away. Volunteers shared his photo online, and it was seen by a cousin who contacted officials. Reunification took 2 days. "He was scared, but okay," said a nurse at the shelter. Over 200 children were temporarily unaccompanied in the days following the storm. Coast Guard crews rescued 27 people from rooftops in one suburb alone. High water made roads impassable, and helicopters worked for hours. Most were elderly, some waving towels or flashlights. One couple was lowered in a harness with their cat in a laundry basket. All were taken to a makeshift landing zone at the football stadium and evaluated for injuries.
A storm rips the roof off a shed with the owner still on top of it. Besides a couple of bruises, he was completely fine.
A caravan of RVs and pickup trucks crawled along the interstate, packed with families, pets, and everything they could strap down. Some pulled boats, others had tarps over furniture. Gas ran out in 2 towns, and the National Guard airlifted fuel to stranded drivers. It was the largest civilian evacuation the county had seen since the 1990s, with more than 150,000 people leaving in under 48 hours. At 3 a.m., police cruisers drove slowly down residential streets, loudspeakers repeating evacuation orders in English and Spanish. Most families had already gone, but some waited too long. Volunteers knocked on doors, helped an elderly woman down the stairs, and carried a toddler wrapped in a blanket. Buses idled at the school parking lot as final groups climbed aboard. Hours later, that neighborhood was underwater. "We got out just in time," said one man, still clutching his dog.